Hello, my name is Chris Whittle from Elinchrom. The ELB400 is our brand new replacement for the Ranger Quadra. One of the new features that this includes is the control system, and what I'd like to do is present the assistance guide tool using the Elinchrom ELB400. So we're looking at the top panel of the new ELB400. The first thing I'm going to do is put a second head into the B channel here. So just by lifting off the cover, putting the head into position here and locking that down, I'm ready to go. That's quite a bit faster than it used to be, where we had to unscrew the cover from the original Quadra. Let's start by turning the pack on. So the button here is the on-off button. We see the version of the software, and straight away the OLED display shows us the setting of the pack itself. I started off by doing a reset of the pack to the factory settings. So this is the factory reset setting. Here we've got the radio in normal mode with the options of normal or speed triggering. We've got frequency 1 of Skyport. We've got group 1 of Skyport. We've got the slave cell off. We've got tone on recycle on. We've got the battery status here. This shows 22 joules, which is the power setting of the pack at the moment. In Elinchrom terms, that's a reading of 1.7, where the 1 is whole stops and the 0.7 is intensive stop. It tells me that I've got head B plugged into here, head A plugged into here, and it shows the power ratios between those heads. At the bottom, I have an indication of the functions. In other words, these buttons here are the function buttons, and this display shows what each of these function buttons does. So, for example, this is minus 0.1 of a stop. So if I press the button here, you can see I'm getting an audio indication. And in fact, if I keep it pressed, it simply tells me that it's on minimum power. This is plus 1/10 of a stop. So again, I can simply increase the power. This is the test button, which it says here. So if I simply press the button, the unit will fire. This is the modelling lamp button. If I press the modelling lamp button, it shows me here that the modelling lamp has come on, and it gives me a countdown in seconds to the modelling lamp turning itself off. If I press and hold the modelling lamp button for 2 seconds, there you saw the modelling lamp had gone off. If I press and hold the modelling lamp button for 2 seconds, you'll see that the 15 changes to an infinity, and now the modelling lamp is on continuous. So the heads with their modelling lamps can be used wherever continuous light is required and can be used for video. And the LED on each of the lamps, and we've got 2 in here, is now rated at about 70 watts, the equivalent of 70 watts of tungsten. One button that we've not spoken about so far is this button here, and that is the menu button. And if I press the menu button, now you can see I get a readout of the various menus, and the functionality of these 2 buttons at the bottom, the function buttons, has changed to up and down. So you can see, using the up button or the down button, I simply move through the various options of the menu, and in the middle, my trigger button, test button, has become a select button. Also notice here we've got the bar, which shows how much more menu there is than I can see on the display. And you can see, therefore, as I move down, that the bar moves. So you can very clearly see if there is more to the menu structure than is visible on the screen itself. So starting again with photocell, you see we move from left to right into the photocell. We can go down through the options. I've got the option of off, on, pre-flash sequence, and the option to set up the pre-flash sequence. Remember that the pre-flash sequence enables this unit to learn the pre-flash sequence of any speed lights which you may be using on TTL mode, and which therefore might have a pre-flash sequence prior to the main firing of the flash unit. What it enables the pack to do, therefore, is learn the pre-flash sequence and fire at the correct moment to make sure that the ELB400 flash is in perfect synchronization with the main flash of the speed light. So let's go back up to back into the menu system here, because it's put itself back to the normal display. Photocell here, we've selected photocell. The standard setting of the unit is with the photocell off. If we want to go down the menu to put it on, all I would do to turn the slave cell or photocell on, all I would do is select that, and now the slave cell is selected, and I go back out of here, 2 presses, and you can see on the display the slave cell is on. So remember, when we come back to the display, it will always show the changes that we've made. So into the menu system again, photocell, we'll select it. We've got, again, photocell off, photocell on. You notice now I've got the tag by the side of on, so it shows me what I have got selected once I'm in the menu as well. We'll go down to pre-flash. We will select pre-flash, and then we go down to set up pre-flash, and now it gives me a number of options. It gives me the auto option, in which situation all I do is fire the speed light at the slave cell here with the pre-flash sequence that I'm going to be using, and it will automatically read and set that pre-flash sequence. Alternatively, if I want to do, I can set the pre-flash sequence up manually, in which case I select manual, and then I take the number of pre-flashes that I know I have, plus the main flash. So if I've got 3 pre-flashes and 1 main flash, I would set the pre-flash count to 4. Again, using the down button here, I simply go down to 4 and select that. And then to come all the way out, I simply press and hold the menu button. Takes me right back to the beginning. And now on the display, it shows by the slave cell PF4. So when I have 3 pre-flashes and 1 main flash, the ELB400 will synchronize perfectly on that 4th flash. That is everything to do with photocell. So now let's go down to Skyport. We select the Skyport here, and we move in, and now you see we have the choice of radio off, but it tells me that the default setting for radio is the normal radio 1 setting, which is a standard synchronization speed. I can also have the speed setting, which is a high speed synchronization, and that gives me about an extra 1/3 of a stop. So instead of maybe using a 200th of a second flash synchronization speed, I could get away with a 250th or maybe even a 300th of a second. Whichever of these I select, and let's leave it in the normal mode for the moment, I then have the option to set up the frequency and the group, because obviously I can control up to 4 groups of lights on each frequency, and in fact I've got 20 frequencies on here, just like I have on the ELC Pro HD. So let's now go down to the group setting. I select it, and I can choose 1, 2, 3 or 4. So let's select 4. On the channel, I just go down 1 level to the channel, I select it, and now you see, just like the ELC Pro HD, I have the channel number, but I also have the dip switch setting on the Skyport radio trigger. So I've got that just as a little reminder as to what I need to set my transmitter to in order to trigger correctly with an ELB400 pack set to these channel numbers. And we go all the way down to channel 20, which again gives us a lot more options, but it also means if there is any interference from local Wi-Fi networks or anything else, then I can choose a channel which is as far away from those Wi-Fi frequencies as possible. So let's go back 1 level, and I'm back to my higher menu. Again, this bar shows me where I am, just going back up through channel, group, speed, normal radio, and off. But now I'm going to select off, simply because I don't want anybody else's flashing to fire this whilst I'm demonstrating. So we'll select that and press and hold the menu button, we come all the way out. It's really very intuitive. Once you get used to the way the menus work, the reminder is here on the screen of what you've done. So again, now we've got radio off. Now we've got the pre-flash sequence set to 4. Nothing else has changed. So let's look again at the menu. We've done everything to do with the photocell, so we go down. We've done everything to do with Skyport, so we go down and we come to audio. We select the audio, and now we see that we've got the choice of the ready volume, the error volume, the key click volume. We can change the ready tone, and if I was to, for example, to select the ready tone, if I go into there, as I choose the various tones, if you listen, it samples each of the tones I go through. I'm not going to make any changes, so if I just come back from there, 1 level brings me to the ready tone, 1 level brings me back to the audio, or I could have simply pressed and held it and it would have brought me all the way out. So that's everything to do with audio. I don't think we need to experience every single option on that. So let's go down 1 more level and go to the flash mode, and this is where it starts to get exciting. If we select the flash mode, we've got a number of options. The default setting is there as option 2. The first setting is flash before ready. The reason we have a flash before ready setting is because if I want to work stroboscopically and I want the prime criteria to be the rate at which the strobe fires, it may not be possible for the pack to recycle to full power at that rate. So I have the option, let's just go back into the menu. I was talking too slowly. Go to flash mode, select it. So I have the option now to set the unit, the ELB400, so it will flash before ready. I can either enable it or I can disable it. So let's enable it just for the sake of argument. So other options, if I go down that menu, of course I've got the default setting, which is just standard. I've got the sequence mode. So if I select the sequence mode here, it enables me to set up sequence. I select setup sequence. This will make this Quadra pack a part, effectively, of an array of ELB400 Quadra packs. But it will also work in conjunction with the ELC Pro HD as well, because all of these special functions also exist on the ELC Pro HD. So the first thing, if I had 5 or 6 packs, I would need to do is set the unit address. So let's just go back into the menu there. We go down to flash mode. We're in sequence. We select it. We go to setup sequence, and we go to set up the unit address. I want this pack to be unit 1, so I select it. Then I go down 1 more level, and I have 1 more option, and I can select the total number of units. So let me select that, and let's say we've got 5 units. So I select 5. If I come all the way out of here now, it tells me that I've set up the sequence mode, that this pack is 1 of 5, and with the Skyport trigger on my camera, each camera exposure will poll each of the 5 packs. So with my motor drive running at 5 frames a second, and with a power setting set that will recycle in less than 1 second, I would be able to shoot with the 5 packs, each firing in sequence, giving me the power I need, and also giving me the exposure rate that I wanted from my motor drive. You can use both the ELB400s with this option and the ELC Pro HDs. So again, there's huge versatility beginning to develop in the Elinchrom system, and you can see the future of where this OLED display is taking us. So let's now go into the menu again. Let's go down, back to where we were, to flash mode. We select flash mode. We've looked at sequence. Now let's look at delayed sync. If I select delayed sync, what this enables me to do is delay the point at which the flash will fire within an exposure. So if I had the shutter open for 1 second, which is 1,000 milliseconds, and I wanted to have the flash fire halfway through the exposure, all I would do is adjust the delay here. So the Skyport trigger would fire at the point where the shutter opens, the pack would delay, say in this case 500 milliseconds, the exposure was 1 second, and now all of a sudden I've got the ambient light drag, I've got the flash exposure in the middle, and then I've got the ambient light drag afterwards. What I can do is I can vary the increments. So you can see I've got steps here of 100 milliseconds. But I can change with this modelling lamp button here the steps. So I've got 1 millisecond, 10 milliseconds, 100 millisecond or 1,000 millisecond steps, which means that I can set anything up to 10 seconds as a delay on here if I want to do. And if I want to select that, I simply press the save button, come all the way out, and now you can see here that I've set a delay of 500 milliseconds. It's so easy to fine-tune the setting to get the effect that I'm looking for. And this is what Elinchrom's all about. It's all about giving you options that otherwise you wouldn't have. So let's go back into the menu now and have a look at what the next option was in that menu. We go down to flash mode and we select it. We've shown what we can do with the delayed sync. Now let's look at the stroboscopic mode. We go down to stroboscopic mode, we select it, we select setup strobo, and here now I can set the frequency. So let's select the frequency. I can go from 1 Hertz through to 10 Hertz. So let's just increase the frequency with the up button. So we go to 10 Hertz, which is the maximum. Let's suppose I had a dancer who's doing a pirouette, and I wanted 5 Hertz, but I wanted an exposure time of, say, 1.5 seconds. So we'll save that 5 Hertz. Let's go down to the duration here. We select the duration. I decided that my pirouette was going to take 1.5 seconds. So now I select 1.5 seconds and I save it. So my shutter is going to be open for 1.5 seconds. My dancer is going to do a pirouette, and I am going to have 5 exposures per second over that 1.5 seconds, and that should give me the effect that I am looking for. But the nicest thing about this is that I can fine-tune it. If I wanted a faster exposure rate, I can change the hertz. If I want a longer time, I can adjust the time. And because all of this is full flash curve technology, and so long as the pack will recycle fast enough for you, you will always have perfect colour and perfect exposure in every image adjacent to each other within the single frame. Again, all of these features are the features on the ALC Pro HD, and this shows you the direction of Elinchrom in terms of creativity and the options that we want to leave you with. Ultimately, the OLED display is all about putting you in charge of those things and making it so easy for you to make those changes that it's intuitive. So now let's look at the menu below flash mode, and that is power settings, and we'll select it. Auto standby, auto off, modelling lamp or pilot lamp, and recycling time, and then step per push. Let's just start at the top. Auto standby, if I select it, enables me to adjust the amount of time, increase or decrease the amount of time, after which the auto standby will power the pack down in order to preserve the battery for, well, effectively to make the battery work as hard as possible for you because we're not wasting power. What I can also do is I can turn that off. And interestingly, one of the things that I do at exhibitions when I don't want equipment to turn itself off whilst we're demonstrating it or whilst it's on display is I turn the auto standby off, so you can see it's disabled, so we'll save it. I would do the same thing with auto off as well. So instead of it, for example, being here 15 minutes, the maximum I think is 60 minutes. Yes, it is. Again, I would turn that down to auto off being disabled, so we'll save that. Let's go down to the modelling lamp. Now this is interesting. The modelling lamp, when I select the modelling lamp, it enables me to adjust the time that the modelling lamp is on for as standard with a single press on the modelling lamp button. You saw that if I pressed and held my finger on the button, the modelling lamp would stay on continuously. But here I can adjust the amount of time the modelling lamp stays on for from 60 seconds down to as little as 1 second. And that means that if I wanted to do a timed exposure and use the modelling lamp of the ELB400 to do that, I could simply open the shutter of the camera and use the modelling lamp to give me a timed exposure. Again, I don't know whether you'd want to do it, but it's all options. It's all flexibility, let's say. So let's save that. If I go back to the menu here, it reminds me of how the unit is set up. So every one of the things that we've changed that's displayed here continues to be shown. Let's now go back into the menu. Let's just go down through these various options. We've talked about power settings. There's one other thing that I need to show you on the power settings. We've talked about auto standby, auto off, pilot lamp, recycling time. If I select the recycling time, where on the original Quadra we had a slow on or slow off position, here now we have the eco mode, which I can select, which is the equivalent of slow, and I have the fast mode, which is the equivalent of fast recycle. So at full power, eco mode would take about 4 seconds to recycle. At full power, fast mode would take about 1.6 seconds to recycle, and I can choose. And again, if I come back out of here, now the menu actually shows the eco mode here. So you'll know automatically if you've got it on slow recycle. The reason we call it the eco mode is if you're not using much power, you will get slightly more flashes, a few more flashes out of the eco mode from a given battery than you will in fast mode, although once you're using high power, the difference is very small. I don't know why, it's just one of the peculiarities of the battery. So let's go back into the menu again. Let's go down to power settings. There was one last thing, step per push. I don't think most people want to do this, but if you select it, you can select the number of tenths of an f-stop that each button changes the power by. And this is interesting because I'm going to choose one full f-stop. So if I select that, come all the way out, you can see, it's come out all the way out, you can see now that the display shows me that each increment on this button here is one full f-stop. It's changed from 0.1 to 1. So plus 1 stop, minus 1 stop, and this time you see that the power varies in whole numbers rather than the decimal points. And also the power here on the display changes from 424 at full in whole stop steps as we go down through the power range. It's all options. The other thing that's really nice about the display though is look at the A and B head. Elinchrom users very quickly get used to what this number means and how many watt seconds a reading of 3 is. They know their speed light is maybe 50 odd watt seconds. They know that 3 is therefore an equivalent amount of power. But because with 2 heads plugged in, we have a lighting ratio of 2 to 1, a power ratio of 2 to 1. Of course, that's varied according to the accessories that are put onto each of the heads and the distance that the head is from the subject. But the ratio stays the same. If I know with a given softbox, maybe I'm using 2 lights, maybe I know with a given softbox I wanted a reading of 3 on my main light to give me the correct exposure. All I would need to do is adjust the power so that the A read 3 and of course the B read 2. This is something that you couldn't do with the old Quadra. So it's much quicker to set up because you can actually see what the power level is on each head, even though you can't adjust the split of the asymmetry. Let's now go back into the menu. We'll go all the way down now to statistics. Statistics is the last option that we've got. We select statistics, and now it shows me The unit life of this unit has been 35 hours and 5 minutes. The flash count is 898. The power on count is 207. This is a unit that was used at the recent photography show, and that's the reason why the number of flashes is so low for that number of on-off cycles. So we select OK, and that's everything. Press and hold the menu button, takes us all the way out to the beginning. Interestingly, of course, nobody in their right minds would have a pack set up as we've now got this pack set up. So I simply press the plus and minus buttons. That will put the pack back onto its factory default settings, and this becomes my starting point for the next job. Now, there's one thing that this pack does that is unique, which I haven't yet shown you. It is the way in which the pack recovers the battery. So we'll just get ourselves sorted out, and I'll show you that. What I'm going to do now, this battery here is actually a deep discharge battery. The battery on the pack obviously is working perfectly because you can see I'm powering the pack. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the pack off. I'm going to take the battery off this pack. I'm going to replace it with the battery which I know is faulty, and I'm going to put this back down to here, so hopefully you can see what's going on. When I try to turn the unit on, you might just see a flicker. It was there just for about 1/10 of a second. But this battery is a deep discharge battery. This pack has the capacity to resurrect that battery, and I'm going to show you how. In my pocket, I have the cable here, which is a charge cable. On the side of the battery is a socket, which is a charge socket. I simply plug the battery charger into the battery, and now I turn the pack on, and watch what happens. It firstly verifies the firmware, and then it says here, battery auto recovery. Recovery in progress. It says pre-charging, please wait. And you'll see that the pre-charging says 55%, 57%, 59%. Now in the beginning it moves very quickly because what it's doing is the charger is measuring the voltage, the current and the temperature of each cell, and at the same time raising incrementally the voltage on each cell. So it's rather like a slinky, rather like a helix, in the sense that it pulls around every single one of the batteries in order to lift the voltage to the point ultimately where the battery cells individually will remember that they are batteries, and then we will be able to charge the batteries properly. It takes a little time for the battery, the pre-charging of the battery, to get to 100%. And the closer it gets to 100%, the slower it gets. Once the pre-charging sequence gets to 100%, it then means that each of the cells are ready to take the full charge, and any charger, any lithium-ion battery charger, without the pack attached, would then be able to finish the recovery process. But if you leave the battery attached to the bottom of the pack, it will automatically charge it up to 100%. The other thing to remember, in fact the only thing to remember about the battery recovery process, is that it isn't without a cost. Ultimately, each recovery process does damage the battery. It's not the recovery process, but each deep discharge situation does damage the battery a little bit. So whilst we can recover the battery, it won't quite have the same capacity that it would have had if it had never been deep discharged. So it's still worth charging the batteries when you've finished the job, and also charging the batteries a second time before you go on to the next job, where there's been a delay between finishing one job and starting another. Now you'll see that the recovery in progress has gone to a charging mode from the earlier pre-charge mode, and it's charged 1% of 30%. This is a fast charge mode, and it will work quite quickly through this to the point where it could be charged by any charger. Well, that was fun. For me, this new control system, which is completely compatible with the ELC Pro HD, is our future. It's the Elinchrom future. It's the Pro system. Hopefully you'll agree with me that it's much easier to use than the existing Quadra, and hopefully it will enable you very easily to unlock all the special features of the ELB400. Thank you very much for your time watching. I hope I haven't bored you, and have fun.